it's the school summer holidays and you've got loads of time ahead of you and wondering what on earth to make with the kids. Don't worry, I have got you covered because we are going to make a lavender stripy heart. It's lavender because, not because of the colour, but because we're going to put some lavender flowers in it to make it smell nice. So this is very beginner friendly, so even if you're a beginner sewer, you'll be able to make this. Hey, who needs kids? You can make it for yourself and make a nice gift. However, kids love to sew. I'm a great believer in getting kids to sew for our future generations. So we're going to make this with a full tutorial over this video. I'm going to work with you to make it. So, who am I? I am Kim. This is Quilt with Kim. You are very welcome. Let's go check out exactly what you need to get your heart started. To make your stripy heart then, you're going to need a few things. So you need some fabric, obviously. So you need a couple of fat quarters that nicely match or contrast. I've got some funny sharks and sea shapes here with some waves on this one, so this is quite cool. You're going to need your thread to match both on the top and the bottom in the bobbin. Then you're going to need some ribbon. This is just a scrap of ribbon I had hanging around. This is actually a grain ribbon, which is just a little bit tougher. It doesn't shred quite so much as the satiny ribbon. You're going to need your ribbon about 45 centimetres long. If it's a bit shorter or a bit longer, it doesn't matter, but about that length. So that's your fabric covered. Then you're going to need, if you're a quilter, you're going to need your rotary cutter and your quilting ruler. But if you're not, don't worry, we can cover it all. You're going to need a pencil, just a normal everyday ruler. Then you're going to need some fabric scissors. So nice sharp fabric scissors. So that's those three because we need to cut our fabric. You are also going to need some paper scissors. Please don't use your fabric scissors to cut paper. So get some separate paper scissors. You are also going to need a glue stick, just a stick glue stick like that one. Stick glue stick, you know what I mean, a glue stick. Then you're going to need a pen thrown in just to put us off our scent. You don't necessarily need a pen. You're going to need the template that I have put the link to just below this video. So you need to print out that. This is just a standard A4 size bit of paper. So print out your heart shape on that. And you're going to need a cereal box. So this is just half a cereal box from Sainsbury's as it happens, but you're going to need a bit of cardboard or the inside of a cereal box. You just need a big enough piece so that we can stick our heart down on there. So that's what you need. Don't worry, down below with the template I've also put a list of what you need and the instructions as well, so you can print all of those off. Right, let's get going to what we need to do first. Hold on, before we do the next bit, I forgot to say, if we're going to put things in our heart, we're going to need something to put in it. So you're going to need some toy stuffing. This is this kind of fluffy toy stuffing stuff that you can get at any hobby store at all, any hobby shop. And you're going to need some lavender flowers. Now, this is a ginormous bag because I teach and I have big bags of things, but you can get little bags. You don't need very much at all. We're only going to use 3 or 4 teaspoons. So you don't need very much, but you do need some lavender seeds if you want it to smell nice. You can, of course, leave these out. It is not essential to make your pretty lavender heart. So let's get on and get our template ready. That's the first thing that we need to do. The first thing we're going to do is stick our hearts down onto our cardboard so that can be drying whilst we do our stitching. So that's very simple to do. We're going to go onto the back of our piece of paper. We're going to get our glue stick with a lid that's stuck on, and we're going to put glue all over the back of our heart. Oops. So it sticks down nicely onto our cardboard, just like that. Make sure you put the lid back on so it doesn't dry out. And then we're going to stick our heart down on the back or the inside of our cardboard cereal box, whatever it is that you've got. Now the reason why I've stuck it on the inside is because the outside of cereal boxes tend to be quite shiny and they're a bit more difficult to stick on. So we're sticking it on the inside to smooth out any bubbles. Don't worry about all the edges. You don't need those stick down. All we're worried about is our heart, really. So if that's all smoothed down and stuck down, just put that to one side because that can be drying whilst we do the rest. Okay, so that's the part one of our template. Now let's get on to our fabric. Now we get on to our fabric. So the first thing that we're going to do is give our fabric a really good press. If it's been folded up for a while, you're going to get all the creases in, so we need to get rid of all of those. I'm going to do my fabric, iron my fabric off camera. It's nothing special to it. You're just ironing the fabric on a medium to hot iron. So that's all you need to do now. And then I'm going to meet you back here in the next section with our ironed fabric. So go and do that and I'll meet you back here in a sec. If you've got some nicely ironed fabric, the next bit is we're going to cut some strips. Now, if you're a quilter and you've got a rotary cutter and a ruler, you'll pretty much know what to do, but I'm going to cover it off anyway. But if you aren't a quilter and you haven't got your ruler and rotary cutter, don't you worry, because if you've got your pencil and just a normal ruler, I'll show you what to do with that as well. But we start off in exactly the same way. So I'm going to put one piece of fabric aside. I'm going to show you each method on each piece of fabric. So don't you worry, whichever one you are, I've got you covered with the other one. So find the selvage on your fabric. That's generally the bit on one edge of your fabric that it is a bit thicker and it's got a few little holes in it. Can you see there? If I hold it all the way up to the camera, that's what you're looking for. That is the selvage of your fabric. When we've got the selvage, we're going to fold our fabric in half so that the selvage meets the edge on the opposite side. And we want to smooth that out so it gets nice and straight. Now the reason for that is because we're going to cut some straight strips and we need to find the straightest part of our fabric, and that generally is always these weft threads that go, sorry, the warp threads that go across. Don't shoot me, it's been a long day. So it's going to be the warp threads that go across here. All right, so I folded it in half. Don't worry about the edges if they're not matching. This is what we're going to get rid of, so just don't worry about that. What you're concerned about is making sure that those two edges are matching nicely, and smooth it so it's sitting on one of those grain lines going across the top there. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, the first method I'm going to show you with the quilting ruler and rotary cutter. I am going to put the horizontal line, any horizontal line on your ruler, I'm going to put on that fold. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because before we cut any straight lines, we have to give ourselves a straight edge. If you're a well-practiced quilter, you'll know this, but if you're a beginner, you probably won't. So what we have to do is get rid of these scraggy ends on the edge here, because quite often they don't match up anyway, so we need to get rid of them. So we're going to put the horizontal line, as I said, any horizontal line at all, on the top of our fold there and make it all nice and straight. And if we're happy that that is straight up there, all we need to do is cut this off. Don't worry that this doesn't look straight. That's why we're doing this. So get your rotary cutter, cut that bit off. Don't forget to put your guard on, and then that bit can be thrown away. Then you are going to turn that cut edge over to your left. If you are right-handed, the fabric that we want is always going to be underneath our ruler on the left. Okay, if you're just using ruler and pencil, don't worry, yours is coming up in just a moment. So I'm going to cut 1.5 inch strips, and out of this particular fabric I'm going to cut 4 strips. So what you'll end up doing is cutting 4 strips out of one fabric and 3 strips out of the other fabric. So I'm going to measure my 1.5 inches on my ruler, and I'm going to cut 4 1.5 inch strips. So let's do that really quickly. So if you're new to using a quilting ruler, what I'm doing is putting a horizontal line on the fold and finding my 1.5 inch line down the edge there, and I'm putting it on the edge of my fabric, that cut edge. That's why we start always with a cut edge. And I think my rotary cutter blade needs replacing, but I can't really do it in the middle of recording this for you. Alright, so that is my 4 strips out of my fishy fabric here. So that's ready to go. Then, out of the other fabric, I'll show you the other method. So we're going to start exactly the same way. We're going to find that selvage, which is down at the bottom here. You can see all the dots very clearly on that bit. That's where it's held onto the loom when they're weaving the fabric. And we're going to fold that up so it matches the opposite edge at the top there. We're going to flip it up so our fold is along the top. That just makes it easier for you. That's all there is. You're going to get your normal ruler. Again, don't worry because the edges aren't matching. We don't need to worry about that. We're going to get rid of those. So you're going to get your ruler here. On your ruler, you've got all your little measurement lines. So what we need to try and do is get a horizontal line going across. That's what you're after. So I am looking at where that naught line is here. And I know you can't quite see, but that naught line is sitting on the fold. Let's see if I can bring it all the way up to camera so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So that's where it is sitting, and although it's not on a line on this side, there's enough of a line here to get, it's not quite working holding it up, to get it on the fold. So that's what we're after, is a nice straight edge. So if I line that up, and then all I am going to do is draw a line down there. So a pencil line down at the edge. Let me just show you. So I've just drawn a pencil line all the way down from the top to the bottom. Then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do anything with it right now. I'm going to turn it round just because it's a bit easier to do this way. Okay, so if you're ruler and pencil, if you're part of the ruler and pencil gang, turn that over. And then we're going to measure, find the 1.5 inch marks on your ruler, and we want the 1.5 inch measurement just there. So we're going to utilise the fold along the bottom to help us give us a nice straight line, and we're going to put a little pencil mark at 1.5 inch. So that's just there, and then we're going to measure along another 1.5 inches, because if you remember, we need 3 strips of this. So I'm going to do that again. So I've got 3, 1, 2, 3. Let me show you those little marks. Can you see? So that's the first 1.5 inches, the second 1.5 inches, and the third 1.5 inches. And that's from our first pencil line. Not from the edge, it's from the pencil line just here. Okay, so I'm now going to do the same at the top of the fabric. So what I've done here, that naught line that we had, I've got that sitting on that pencil line. And then I'm measuring along 1.5 inches, and then another 1.5 inches, and then another 1.5 inches. Okay, and then if you want to do another set in the middle, you absolutely can do, if it helps you keep some straight lines. Let's get that thread out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is sorry, it's all gone off the bottom there. I'm going to draw a line to join all of those lines up. Okay, so I'm measuring along all those little dots, and then the third lot there. So let me show you what I've done. So there's my first little line, and those are my 3 pencil lines there. And then what we're going to do is get our fabric scissors and very carefully cut up those lines. I know this looks like there's loads and loads of lines on here. It's just where there's still some creases left in the fabric. The thing is, with a camera, it makes creases in the fabric look about 300 times worse than they actually are. So I've only got my 3 pencil lines, and I am going to cut very carefully up those lines. And then by doing that, we'll end up with our 3 strips. So let's speed up whilst I do this. Okay, so we've got our 3 strips there, and we've cut off that little scraggy bit at the end, which we don't want, so that can go. All right, so we've ended up with 3 strips of one colour, and we've got 4 strips of the other colour. And now we need to go and thread up our machine and get ready to stitch. But there's a little bit of a magic trick to stitching these together, so let me cover that in the next section. First up, we want to lay our fabric strips out. So open your strips up and lay them out so you have alternate fabrics, just like we have here. Okay, if your fabric has a pattern on it which all goes in one direction, you probably just want to make sure that all the patterns are going in the same direction. But that's the first thing to do, is lay out your fabric strips. Then we're going to stitch them together, and herein lies the trick. So we want to stitch our fabric strips together with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I've just popped a photo on screen to show you what your settings are on your machine to get to 1/4 inch, and it basically means we'll be running our raw edge along the edge of our foot here. So we want to take our first 2 strips, and we're going to place them right sides together. You don't need to pin this, but put them right sides together so it's all neat and tidy, and it will move around because it likes to do that. Let me just try and get that more into camera for you. There you go. You can see I've got all the other strips just next to me on the left here, so they're all ready to go. Okay, so let's get these done. So I'm always going to start with my needle down. I don't need to lock stitch these at all. If you're wondering what that is, that's when we go forwards and forwards again at the beginning of a stitch line to stop it becoming unravelled, but we don't need to do it on this. But I do need to stitch a nice neat 1/4 inch, so we're following the edge of our foot with the edge of our fabric. And if you're thinking, I can't sew a straight line, don't you worry, yes you can. You're looking in the wrong place. So most people, when they start, they look at the needle, and it is impossible to stitch a straight line when you're looking at the needle. So what you need to do is look over to the right. So look at where your fabric is and just concentrate on keeping your fabric matching up to the edge of your foot. And if you do that, I promise you, you'll end up with a straight line. It is a straight stitch line. It is practice, but don't look at your needle. Your needle won't go anywhere and it's looking after itself pretty much. Your job is just to keep these two pieces of fabric together. Now what you can't quite see off camera, let me just move my camera so you can see. I'm holding my fabric in my hand and that helps keep those two pieces of fabric together. Okay. All the way down here. Now I don't want you to run away and get carried away. I just want to show you what to do at the end of this strip. And I'll explain why in just 1 minute, but I can't do it without finishing this strip. So just bear with me for a minute. Or for a few seconds as we're running down the end. Okay, I'm just going to finish there for a minute. Now, when you sew lots of strips together, what can happen is they end up in a nice banana shape. And we don't really want that for our heart. We want nice straight strips. And the reason why that happens is because people start stitching at the top of their fabric and they stitch all the way down and then they start in exactly the same place at the top again. And that's what ends up with the banana shape. So what we need is to stitch from alternate ends all the time. That sounds complicated, it's not really. So we've finished a stitch line here, and as we come off the end, so I'm just coming off the end here, I'm going to cut my thread. So this end here will now be the end that we start stitching with. All right, so I'm going to open it up. I'm going to take it out from underneath the machine. And the next one that we're going to stitch is one of our sharks. So if I open it up and I put my blue on the right in my instance, because I'm going shark, blue, and so on. I'm going to get my shark fabric and then I'm going to put that, whoops, it's attacking me. I'm going to put that right sides together. You will find it a lot easier without loads of filming shenanigans in the way, I can promise you. So I'm going to put that over onto my blue. And then I'm going to start stitching that in exactly the same way. So once your needle's in and your presser foot's down, you can get your hand down here and sort it all out and tell it to stop mucking about. And let me get to the end of this one. And then we'll be doing the same thing again. So take a moment all the time just to make sure our edges are nicely matching. And the same thing again. Okay, so we're coming off the bottom here. Let's cut my thread, and again this is the end that we're going to start stitching on. Okay, so I'm going to open it up, I'm going to turn it around, and the good thing is I can either stitch my blue on there, or this is the one that we've just stitched on. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to get my blue, and this time I'm turning it around. Let's just open up so you can see now my seams are on the back. This is all fine, it'll all sort itself out. Okay, so this was the bottom that I finished, and it's now the top. And this is how we do that alternate stitching. Okay, so off we go again. So we're going to do the other strips in exactly the same way. I'm going to film but speed up a bit, and then we'll meet at the other end, okay? How did that go? You should end up with a nice straight new bit of fabric with your alternate strips, and the next thing we're going to do is give this a good press. All right, so I'm going to get my iron, my little mini iron, onto the camera here, because there's a little trick in making sure that this is nicely pressed, so it's good to show you that. So just bear with, because I've got a very magic way of getting the iron. For our pressing of our strips, we need to get all of these seams going in the same direction. That will just stop any bulkiness happening on the inside of our heart. So if you turn your fabric so it's right side facing down, and get your iron, and then if you put the iron on the fabric on the first strip and give it a tug with your other hand, and then press away as you go. This is not very easy on my very temporary ironing mat, which is basically a towel folded up with lots and lots of insulated wadding inside. So I do not want you to put a towel on your cutting mat, because your cutting mat will not like it. Please use your ironing board. I'm just showing you this to demonstrate, but this has got lots of special insulation in the middle to stop the heat going through to my cutting mat. But we're going to do this all the way along. In fact, what I'm going to do, because it's quite difficult, I'm going to show you this bit, and then I'm going to sneak off and go and do it on a proper iron. Okay, so you can see as I'm pressing away from me, but also pulling with my hand. But you don't want your hand there all the time, because it's hot. When you've done all of this side with the seams, then we're going to flip it over. And you want to be going the same way. Where's my seams going? Yeah, the same way with your iron on the right side. So you really want to be pressing into those seams to make sure that they're all nice and flat, and there's no little foldy bits and it's not coming back on itself. Just make sure when you've turned it over that the seams are going upwards. Okay, because that will make it a lot easier for when you are pressing it. So if you go and do that, I'm going to go and do it on my ironing board, because it's a lot easier, and then I'll meet you back here, and then we'll start creating a heart. How exciting! You should now have a nice flat new bit of fabric that you've created with your alternate strips, and all of your seams are going in the same direction, so they're all laying nice and flat. So now we need to turn this into a heart. So let's put that to one side for a minute and get our template back that we started creating earlier, which now our glue is all nice and dry. Perfect. So we want our paper scissors this time. Do not use your fabric scissors. Use your paper scissors, and we want to cut very carefully around our heart. So cutting through the paper and our cardboard. Be careful as you go round the curves. Okay, so we've ended up with a nicely cut out heart. There's a little bit to trim off there. In fact, that doesn't really matter. That can go in your recycling. Then we're going to get our fabric back again. We're going to get a pencil, and now we're going to cut out our heart shapes. So you're going to get your template, and just on one side of the fabric, you're going to position your heart at a quirky angle. All right, so let's get that. So when we do it at an angle, that means we'll get our diagonal stripes. So when you're happy with it, a couple of things just to watch out. Make sure you haven't got one of these seams right in this little valley of your heart here. So don't have it like that, because it will be a bit difficult when you're sewing and cutting out. So make sure that little valley is just in the middle of one of the strips, and probably at the point as well down here you want to make sure that's on your bottom strip. So we just want a quirky angle like that. And then all you're going to do on the right side of your fabric is draw round your heart. And don't worry about the pencil line, because that will all disappear in our stitching. Don't worry if you're drawing on your heart like I am. This is just a template, so you can use this template again and again for any heart-shaped things that you might want to do. If it moves and wriggles about and slides about, just take a moment to put it back in position, because these hearts can be a bit naughty and slide around. Okay, so that's one heart that we've drawn, which you can't see at all. So if I hold that all the way up, can you see I've drawn that pencil heart, whoops, just here. Can you see that? All the way around and all the way around at a nice quirky angle. So that's heart 1 is here. And then heart 2, so we're going to cut 2 hearts out. You want it going in the opposite direction at another quirky angle, but like making a mirror image. It doesn't need to be in exactly the same place, but you still want the point to sit on this strip at the bottom, and you want to make sure that your little valley is in the middle of a strip at the top. So it's almost like you're getting a mirror image. And then we're going to do the same thing again, is draw yourself some, draw around your template with your pencil. Keep to the edge of your template, oops, line, and it's just so that you can see, because we'll be cutting these out in a minute. Okay, so you can't see that, can you? There we go. There is our second heart there. Can you see all the way around? All right. Now we're going to get our fabric scissors back again, and we're going to cut out those hearts very carefully, because we want to make sure that we've got nice perfect hearts now. So we'll get our fabric. It is going to be a little bit tricky going over these seams, which is why you need a sharp pair of fabric scissors. So let's get in there and start cutting those out. It is always easier if you cut away from you. And just a little tip, you have far more control in your scissors when you cut here. Sorry, I've disappeared off camera. When you cut here rather than at the tip. So the tips are quite useful for just little bits, but if you're trying to do a big area, get your fabric right in this bit here. I promise it's a lot easier, and you have far more control than you think. And if you're trying to go around a curve, it's actually a lot easier to do. And the other thing is whilst you're cutting right at the open bit of the scissors, I don't know what it's called. I'm sure somebody who's watching this can put a little comment below and tell me what that bit of the scissors is called. My husband will probably tell me. There's probably some fancy name. But if you're cutting with those bits, you don't get any of that jagged cutting. However, when we're coming into this valley, we need a little bit of precision. So I am going to be very careful as I cut into there. Okay, and then as I come up the other side, can you see I'm getting that valley right into that bit of the scissors? And then I'm going to go around the curves nice and easily. on heart 1. Okay, so that's the first one. Doesn't that look fab? And then we're going to do exactly the same with the other one. So I'm going to cut that out, but under my speedy camera. Actually, I cut really, really fast. No, it's a speedy camera. So let me shut up so that I don't get a squeaky voice, and we'll cut round this heart. Ta-da! Now we've got our 2 amazing looking hearts, and they look fab. You can see that little shark poking his nose out there. It looks like it's just about to come out underneath the waves. So next bit we need to do is our ribbon. So let's do that in the next section. To attach our ribbon, we're going to need one of our heart pieces, and we're going to need some pins for this. And then we're going to do a strange thing. It will look strange, but I promise it will all work out. So get one of the ends of your ribbon, and then pop that at the centre of one of the top curves of your heart, and have it directly facing down towards the point of your heart. Yeah, I know this is a bit strange. I promise it works out. Have a little bit of your ribbon jutting out over the top. And the reason for doing that is to make sure that it catches, because ribbons do like to move about. And then what we're going to do, and if they move about, by the way, they'll get out of the way of the stitches. I'm going to put a pin in. And can you see how I've put that pin? So the head is facing down and the point is going up to the edge. That is the professional way of pinning, don't you know? And it is actually a good way of pinning. So we've done that on that side, and then we're going to get this ribbon and we're going to make a loop. Okay, like that. And we're going to make sure that the loop, let's move the pins out of the way for a minute. We've got this loop coming down, and then we're going up the other side, and we're going to poke out in the middle of this top curve again on the other side. You want it in about the same place on both sides. All right, with a little bit jutting out the top. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to put a pin in. So a couple of things to watch out for. Make sure that your ribbon isn't twisted, so it makes a nice curve, and you want to make sure that these ribbons are coming straight down. So what you don't want is that. I know I'm exaggerating. You want a nice straight line of your ribbon coming straight down. That means it will hang properly. Okay, let's just adjust that slightly because that looks a little bit wobbly. So we've got our ribbon pinned in place, and I know you're thinking, what? I promise this will work out. Now the next thing, this is just to save your sanity, get this little loop down at the bottom, the handle, and what I want you to do, there's no fancy folding here, I'm just folding it back on itself into, oops, just a little pile in the middle here. I didn't want to bring that down, I'm just trying to have it lying flat. So I've got the ribbon sort of folded up in the middle, and then I'm going to stick a pin in there. Now the reason why I'm doing that, so I've got that pin in the middle like that. The reason why I'm doing that is because when we stitch the two sides of, or the two hearts together, it's very easy for that to get caught in the stitch line, and you don't want that to happen because you will have to unpick it. So what we're going to do is just pin it out of the way, and then when we've turned it around the other way, we can get rid of it. So this is just to help us out in the middle. We just want to get this bit clear of the side. So that's what we're doing. Having done that, we're then going to pin the two heart halves together. So let's do that in the next section. Make sure that your heart is laying flat. Now we get our other half, and we turn it over because we're going to do right side together. And we're going to match up all the edges nice and neatly. We're going to get our pins, and then we're going to pin these two halves together. Now, do you remember I just said that the professional way of pinning is always the point to the edge? That's exactly what we're going to do all the way around. So make sure that this little point here in the valley is nicely matching. And let's make sure that all these edges all the way around are going to be nicely pinned. The pin keeping a ribbon in place is going to stay there right to the end. Now, a couple of things just before we go too wild. We want to really make sure that the head of our pin is down a good 2 or 3 centimeters, because we'll be sewing along the edge here. And if it's far down, you won't crash into it, it'll be fine. So we're going to pin all the way around. Let's pin over that ribbon again. Making sure that the edges all the time are beautifully matched up. You probably need more pins on the curves, but then when you're on the straights, you probably need less pins. So let's get a pin in there. Let's get that bottom matched up before I do any more pinning, because we want our point at the bottom matched. Then I can stick a couple of pins in here. Okay, and then let's do the other side. I've had my hair cut today, so, which is why I'm looking glamour than normal, but my hair keeps falling down in my face. It's because it's been beautifully blow dried. When I blow dry it all goes back, but when my hairdresser does it, it's all expert and it all looks amazing, but then it falls down. First world problems, eh? Okay, so we're pinning around this section here. Always with the points to the outside. Having the points to the outside makes your life a lot easier when you're stitching, because you can leave these pins in right to the very last minute and take them out just as you get to them. So you don't need to, you won't be sewing over them, but they will hold everything in place until you get to it. And let's stick another pin just on that centre little valley there. All right, so that's what you'll end up with, is a heart with lots of pins. Before we sew, there's one last job that we need to do, so let's go and do that. Before we start stitching, we are going to have to leave a gap. So the best thing to do is mark it with a pencil so that we don't forget to sew around it. Now, the best place for a gap is about here. You want to be careful that you don't start and finish your gap near any of these seam lines, because they can become a bit unraveled, if I can get my words out. So I'd make a little mark in the middle of a strip down here, and then find a place up here somewhere that's not near a seam line and make another little mark there. Okay, so if I hold that up to the camera, can you see I've got a mark there on this strip, and then I've got another mark here on this strip. So we are not going to stitch in this section here. That will be our gap for turning it through and stuffing it at the end. Now, whilst you've got your pencil, I've got another job for you. Is you're going to find this little valley here in the middle of your heart. You might need to move one of the pins out of the way temporarily to do this. So we're going to be stitching this with 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like we stitched all these bits together, all our strips together. So what I want you to do is find about 1/4 of an inch down from that valley and draw a line. Okay, a straight line there. Okay, let me show you that because that didn't quite show up. Can you see I've got a straight line there? And then if you get your ruler, you can get a 1/4 of an inch line going up there and another 1/4 of an inch line that will go up there. So what we will be doing is we will be stitching around here at a 1/4 of an inch, and then when we get to this straight line, we're going to stop and we're going to stitch along the straight line, and then we're going to go up the other side at a 1/4 of an inch. Don't worry, we'll be doing this together, but I just want to preempt to show you that we're going to be stitching along this straight line. So you need to draw that in because it really will help you. Let's get that a bit more straight. It really will help you. Now, it sounds a bit weird having a straight line, but it actually helps to get your point here in your valley more pointy than if you just did down here and then up again. It's less pointy than if you put a straight line across. I know it's very weird, but it's just one of those little tricks. So if you get your pencil line along the bottom there at a 1/4 of an inch, mark out your gap, and then we'll get under the sewing machine. So we're back underneath the machine and we're going to sew with a 1/4 of an inch. Now we're going to start, remember our gap that we drew here, we made a gap, so there's a marker there and a marker down the bottom. We're going to start stitching from this bottom marker because we're going to be going that way, and we're going to start there and give ourselves a lock stitch. So what I'm going to do is put that little pencil line and mark it underneath that little hole in the foot at the top of the foot here, and then my needle will be in the right place. So let me see if I can see that, which I can't. There we go. So you probably can't see that at all, but my little line is showing through that hole. And let's, oh, I didn't set my machine up to do a lock stitch. Now my machine, I can set it to do a lock stitch. A lock stitch basically means you're going to come forward about 3 or 4 stitches. We're going to go back 3 or 4 stitches and then come forwards again. So you can watch my machine do it. It's the same thing when you do it manually, but we do need to lock this because this is the edge of our gap. So we need to make sure, just as before, the edge of our heart is running alongside the edge of our foot, and you are going to be concerned about watching this edge lining up with the edge of the foot here. So I'm going to drop my needle and it's going to go into a lock stitch. And then I'm going to come forward slowly because the next thing is I'm going to have to stop at the point of this heart. So I'm going to take that pin out and I need to judge where the needle is going to fall, and it needs to be in a straight line with that heart, which I know you can't see, but the needle, if I had a ruler there, that needle would be in a straight line lining up with the point of the bottom of my heart. If you can't quite see, lift up your presser foot and have a little look underneath and you'll be able to see that it's in line. So if I'm happy that it's in line, I need my needle in the fabric. I'm going to lift my presser foot and I'm going to turn my heart around so it's pivoting around on the needle and lining it up so the edge of my heart is now on the edge, running along the edge of my foot again. So if it was in the wrong place, it would either be like that where it's coming underneath a foot, or I could have it too far that way. I know I'm exaggerating, but I want it nicely lining up with the foot here. So if I am happy, my foot pedal's disappeared. I am going to start stitching again and come all the way up the side. I take the pins out as I get to them. Now this side is nice and easy because it's straight, but you're going to be coming into a curve. But don't worry, We'll be telling you what to do. So as we come into the curve, we're going to slow down. And remember, what we're doing is we're making sure that the edge is always lining up to the edge of our foot. So if you can see, it's starting to drag away. If I lift up my presser foot slightly with the presser foot lever, just move my fabric, my heart, very slightly so that the edge lines up with the edge of the foot again. Sometimes it is only a very slight movement, and you keep stitching slowly until you can see that it's starting to come away. So I lift up my presser foot lever and turn it a little bit so that it comes back into alignment again. Another few stitches and you can see it moving away. I'm going to take that pin out as I'm there, lift it up, twizzle it a little bit and come forward again. And as you come round this curve here, you are going to have to lift and pivot all the time. Okay. Now, if you're doing this with younger kids, then you can do it together because they can do the foot pedal. And I know that sounds a bit scary, but I've taught a lot of kids, and it's when you get into the rhythm of it, it's very satisfying to do. You can do it as teamwork. You can see every time this is coming away or starting to come out of alignment, I'm lifting my presser foot lever, I'm moving my heart back into alignment, and I'm lowering my presser foot lever. Now we're coming up here to our ribbon, and if you remember, there's a pin in here holding the ribbon in place. We're not going to hit it. So all I'm doing is doing a couple of stitches and a pivot, a couple of stitches and a pivot. Every time I pivot, I'm lifting up my presser foot lever. And just a rule, if you're doing really tight curves, you may just do one stitch and a lift and a pivot. Okay, so now I'm going to come down here, which is a bit straighter, but I still need, I don't want that caught in there. Okay, let's turn it around slowly, take that pin out. Now we're coming up to this straight line. Do you remember we drew this straight line, which is almost impossible to see with the light, but it's just at the end of my fingernail there, it's here. So we are going to stitch, this is now a straight line here, oddly. We're going to stitch until we meet the end of that little straight line, which is here. I know there's a light shining in the way. Okay, and then I'm going to pivot and I'm going to come in a straight line. So I'm now coming towards me on that straight line. So my heart is off to the right, but it's only going to be 2 or 3 stitches. So be very careful. I'm going to go for 3 stitches. Let's take that pin out. Then I'm going to lift and pivot, and I'll be good to come up the other side. So let's take that pin and we start stitching again. Okay, so we're coming round the curve this way. So we're going to be doing lots of lifting and pivot. Lift and pivot. The more lifting and pivoting you do, so just do a stitch or 2 in between the lift and the pivots. That's how you get a smooth circle. If you go a long way before you start lifting and pivoting, that's when you get all those jaggedy stitch lines, and then it looks a bit odd the other side. Let's take that pin out. Let's take this pin out. Okay, we'll keep going round. Okay, and it's now easing up because we're coming around to the other side. Let's get that pin out, make sure that seam is underneath. A couple more stitches, and then we should be pretty much back on the straight and narrow again. Let's take that pin out. Let's hold that down, and then we can just gently curve that round. If you're ever unsure, a little tiny lift and pivot. Okay, and we're coming back, and now the pencil mark at the top of my gap, which you can see just there, that's our marker to say stop, don't sew anymore. So I'm going to stitch up until that line. So this pin is a good marker as well. So I'm going to wait till the needle is on that pencil mark, which has now disappeared from your view, but it is, my needle is on that pencil mark. Let's get that pin out. And now I am going to lock stitch. So we go backwards and then we come forwards again. And then that finishes it off there. So I can take that pin out, and there's a stray pin there. All right. So we've now got our gap, which is good. We've got a lock stitch here. We've gone down to our points. We've pivoted and turned, and we've come all the way around our curve nice and smoothly. We've gone underneath our little valley at the top there with a little straight line along there. So it's come down, it's gone straight, and then it's come back up again. And we've gone round the curve at the top and down to the top of our gap, and we've done another lock stitch. So that's what you want to end up with. And we've got our 2 bits of ribbon poking out the top. They can just stay there, that's fine. They'll all disappear inside of a minute. So what happens next? Now we've finished our stitching, we just want to double check that we haven't got any little holes in our seams. So the best way to do this, you can either put your finger through the hole and push out at the seams, or get a pair of scissors because they're a bit longer. Use the rounded end of the scissors and carefully put it through that little gap that you've created, and just push against all the seams all the way around. You're just sliding the scissors around just to make sure that there's no obvious little holes. You will have ribbons in the way inside. Okay, and if we're happy that we're hole free, the next thing that we need to do is snip round these curves, and that's so that they lay flat when we've turned it through. So you need a sharp pair of scissors, and we're really snipping from where it starts to curve. So if I'm looking at my heart, probably about here, all the way around, and then all the way around there. So let's do that. And what I'm doing is I'm snipping close to the seam, but I'm not getting in, I'm not cutting my threads. So I'm just taking a little snip. Let's do that again. So I'm taking a little snip into the seam, but you can see my scissors are just shy of the stitch line. And you want these to be quite close together. They're probably about a 1/4 inch or so apart. And we're going to stitch all the way around. Don't worry about this ribbon sticking out because it will all disappear inside your heart when we finish, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so do that all the way around. When you get to this little valley in between your 2 mounds of your heart, what I'm doing is very carefully stitching into that valley, and again not quite meeting that stitch line, but doing a little snip at this point here, and that will create your point nicely. I probably need another couple of snips there, and then all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to finish that, and then I'll meet you in the next section to turn it through. Right, we've done our snipping, we've checked our seams, and we're ready to turn through. So you want to get your gap and very carefully turn it through. Just be careful that you don't open the end of these seams. If you think you are, you might want to just put it under the machine and very carefully do a little lock stitch at the end of these affected seams. That might just help you. So we're going to push it all the way through. Be careful of the pins that are in here, because we don't want to be stabbing ourselves like I have just done. Okay. That was a very big tractor that just went past, if you heard that. Okay, and as we get to the pins, we can just take all the pins out because we don't need those anymore. There's another pin somewhere. All right. So if you pull, when you get to the ribbons, if you pull on the ribbon, it'll help to pull out those little bulges on the top of the heart. What are these bits called on the heart? Does anybody know? Let me know below if you happen to know what these curved bits on the heart are called. Okay, so all our snipping will have given us a nice smooth edge. I know it doesn't look quite like it at the moment, but that's because we need to give it an iron. So before I do anything else, we've turned it all the way through, and there we go, ta-da. I said that our handle will be on the top, and that's gone a bit loopy there, but never mind. It's okay. So what we're going to do is get our scissors again and just carefully go inside and run round the inside of your seam. Can you see here? I'm running around the inside of my seam, and that will push all of those seams out. So anything is caught, we want nice smooth lines. So let's get all of that sorted. Okay, and then when you get to the point, I'm just flipping it round and I'm going to poke out the point with my scissors because that all gets caught up generally. There we go. Okay. Being very careful that we're not opening any of these seams here. And then what you're going to do is get back to the iron and we're going to give it a good press and we're going to turn these in a little bit. So let me get my iron warmed up and I'm going to do this just under the camera so that you can see. Iron heated up then and we're all good to go. So when we get to our gap, before we do anything else, we're going to turn in these edges by about 1/4 of an inch. So you're following the seam line. There's a little point there that hasn't poked out. So we're following our seam allowance inside. So I'm turning that in and I'm going to give that a press. And we are going to press the rest of our heart all at the same time. And as you're pressing, you'll be able to see if there's any flat bits like here that you haven't poked out enough. So I'll just get my scissors and just carefully stroke around the inside of the seam to make those all nice and curved again. So that's that. So I've just unironed it. That's that side done, and then we'll do the same to the other side. So we're poking that in, just folding it under so we've got the same 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and give it a press all the way around. So you'll end up with your gap with the edges nicely folded through. So from the top side it looks like it's a continuous line, but if we look in the gap we can see that it's just turned in about 1/4 of an inch and we've pressed that flat. So give the rest of your heart a good press all over. As I said, if you've got any flat bits, now is the time to get them all curvy and make sure there's no tucks or anything, because after now there's no going back. Okay, so happy with that. So that's all looking pretty good so far. And the next thing we're going to do is top stitch around. So let me show you on the other heart here. You can see I've top stitched around the edge of the heart, and that just gives a bit of extra security, but it also makes it look really cool as well, really good. So we're going to do that next before we stuff it. Now, a little bit of a tip is we don't want to sew our gap closed, obviously, so we are going to start stitching just from the edge of our gap, and we are going to lock stitch at the beginning of this, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch from the bottom of our gap, and we're going to follow exactly the same way as we did before. So we're going to go from there, we're going to go to the point, we're going to go all the way around, but when we get to our little valley here, this time we're going to make a point and then come up the other side and round, and then we're going to stop at the top of our gap and lock stitch there, because obviously we don't want to close our gap here. If I just show you on the pink version, you can see I've created a point at the top here, and that's what we're going to do with our top stitching on our blue version here. So to set your machine up, you need back on 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this time we want our stitch length to be at 3, which just makes it a little bit longer and it just shows up a little bit better. So if you look on the screen now, you'll see a little photo pop up to show you what the setting is on your machine. But let's get your machine set up. Your thread, you can use exactly the same thread as you did before, or you can go mad and wild and swap out your thread for something more decorative if you want to. It is entirely up to you. I'm going to keep the same thread in because I've got a nice blue, so that will look really good on here. So get your machine set up with the thread you want, get the stitch length up to 3, your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll get that top stitching sorted. All set up then. So here's our gap. So I'm going to start stitching from the bottom of my gap. I'm going to line that up as before. So the edge of my heart is just on the edge of my foot there. I don't know what's going on there. Let's sort that out. And then I'm dropping the needle. I've already set my machine up to lock stitch, but as we know, that's forwards, backwards and forwards again. So let's just get that going. And then just like before, we need to stop our needle when it's equal, parallel, perpendicular, it's lining up with the point at the bottom of our heart. And when it is, we can turn our heart around. So we lift up a presser foot lever, we turn our heart around, and now we're coming off, following our heart in this direction. And then the same thing as before, when we come up to this curve, we can go slowly round the beginning of the curve, but now we'll have to lift our presser foot lever and pivot a little bit, particularly as you come up to this tight curve at the top. So it's exactly the same technique as before. And keep going. So sometimes it's just one stitch and we lift the presser foot lever and it's one stitch, and we keep going, one stitch, and that'll get you your smooth curves. If it didn't matter on the inside, well, it does matter on the inside, but this is a good time to get your curves because this is the bit that's on show. So top stitching, it does help to secure your edges, but it is decorative, so it's the stitching that is meant to be seen. It's called top stitching because it's on the top. I don't know who thinks up these terms, I tell you. Okay, and I'm coming all the way around, so I'm now going to go straight, and I'm going to not finish, but I'm going to stop with my needle in here so it's lining up with the point of my valley. So let's do that. Nice and slow. And I think that's about right. You'll be able to tell if you're not in the right place So I'm not 100% sure, I think it is, but my needle is in. If I lift up my presser foot needle lever and turn it around, can you see that my heart is not lining up to the edge of my foot? So that means I haven't gone far enough with my stitch. So I need to carefully turn it back and just do one more stitch, and then I can turn it around and go back again, and now look, it's all matched up. All right, so there's a little tip there for you. So now we're going to come up this way, and the same thing, we're going to come around this curve, so it'd be lift and pivot. Okay, so you can see it's pulling away, so we're going to lift and pivot, lift and pivot, lift and pivot, lift and pivot. Who knew you'd be listening to a YouTube video that says lift and pivot? Okay, all the way around the corner. I'm keeping this in real time, but if you do want to speed up, at the bottom right of the YouTube video, YouTube puts this there, I don't, but there's a little settings thing and you can change the speed, so you can have me speaking like Minnie Mouse if you want to. So I'm coming around the corner. I need to be aware of where the top of my gap is because I want to stop here. Okay, and let's just come up to that bit just there. One more stitch and then lock stitch that. Okay, and there is all our top stitching done. So what I would do now, I'm not going to do this on camera, but give that a quick press all the way over, because that helps to what's called set the seam. It just helps the thread sink down into your fabric and makes it look really nice. So give it a quick press, and then we'll meet back here in the next section and we'll get this stuffed and get your lavender flowers in. So see you in a second. So we've done our top stitching, it's all looking fab. Now we've got to turn our heart into our stuffed heart and finish it off. So this is where you need your toy stuffing. So it's just polyester toy stuffing. How much do you need? Well, it kind of depends on how tight or squashy you want this to be. This is quite squashy, but it looks great. I haven't got too much in there. So when you get your toy stuffing, a little tip with this, because it will come out looking a bit clumpy like that. So if you spend a couple of moments just teasing it out, it's a bit like candy floss. Mind you, you wouldn't want to do this with candy floss because you get very sticky fingers. So we tease that out and then we find our gap wherever that's disappeared to. And then through our little hole, we're going to put our stuffing. And when you start pushing it in, you want to get your fingers in and push it right up to the opposite curve at the top. And you're going to keep doing that until it is all stuffed. So you're always going to go to the opposite of where you are and get them into get the stuffing into the curves of your heart, right into the edges and all the way around. It is easier pushing it into all the far away places before you do the middle bit. So I'm going to stop speaking. I'm going to do this with this sped up and then we'll meet at the other end. Okay then, here we are, all stuffed up, and I'm just looking at my watch. That took me about 2-3 minutes to do. I know this bit was sped up, but that took me about 2 to 3 minutes to stuff all that. And it's squashy, but it's nice and firm. It looks great. You don't want to go so tight because we will be stitching up this hole in a minute. but that feels great to me. But first we have to put in some lavender seeds. So if you want to put in lavender seeds, we'll do that in the next section, and then we'll stitch this up to finish. Right, lavender seeds, here we go, lavender flowers I should say. So I've put a few of my lavender flowers in just an old plastic container here. I've got a teaspoon because that'll help you. And then we need our heart. We need to find the gap, and I would do this over your plastic container and stick your finger in, make a hole in your in your stuffing. And we're simply going to, say simply, well, the flowers can go everywhere. This is why you need to do it over a plastic container or a tray or something of that type. You need to catch the seeds. So I'm going to squash them in to my heart. Okay, and squash them all the way down. And don't worry, these will all spread around and sort themselves out. But I'm going to squash them in with my teaspoon. I have no idea what's happened to my voice. It's gone all croaky all of a sudden. Okay. We only need a few teaspoons. How many teaspoons? Actually, you can do as little or as much as you like. And if you don't want lavender flowers, you don't need to. But it does make it smell really nice. And this makes a really nice present as well, if you're putting lavender flowers in. And you can, when the lavender smell starts disappearing, you can zhuzh it up a bit by getting a bit of lavender essential oil, putting a few drops. So I can feel with my fingers, I'm squashing all that lavender into the stuffing. Okay, so I think that's probably enough because I do have to stitch this up. And that's one of the other reasons why we have done this top stitch, because we've got really tiny lavender flowers. We don't want them escaping. So that top stitch helps. I'm going to put one more in for good measure. There we go. Righty ho. And can you see there we've got our lavender in, the stuffing's in there as well. When this is stitched closed, we can just mould it and massage it so it all moves around, because it might feel a bit lumpy at the moment, and that's because we've been squashing all of our stuffing out of the way. So let's get that in there. So I don't need my lavender seeds, so those, or lavender flowers, they can go back in my bag. And we're going to get this back onto the machine and very carefully stitch it up. You can do this by hand if you want to, but a machine would do a tighter stitch. But there is a way of doing this, which I will show you now, because that is the final bit. So we're ready to stitch this up at our machine. If you've skipped ahead to this bit because you didn't want to do the lavender, I'm just going to recap that. You can stitch this up by hand if you want to, but a machine will give you a tighter stitch finish, and that will stop your lavender flowers escaping. So it is a bit tricky, but don't worry, you can do it, and it's only a little area. So we've still got our 1/4 inch setting on the machine with our stitch length of 3, but what we're going to do is really get our finger in and push everything away from that gap, which is almost impossible to do with my camera in the way. I'm really pushing because I need as much space as I can to get my presser foot along there. So it's gone down quite a long way. If I show you, you can see there's now quite a gap. And don't worry, it will all come back again, but we want to get it out of the way. And when you're happy that it's pushed right down into the body of the heart, then we can close this gap up. Now, can you see why it was important to tuck in these little seams of the folds, because this will help us enormously at this stage. I'm just making sure that there's no flower heads in my stitch line, and if I'm happy with that, I'm going to get underneath, lined up with the end of my stitch line where I was before, because I want to go over that just a little bit, and I am going to lock stitch. So let's just make sure that these edges are all lined up. Okay. So, oops, sorry, I keep knocking everything. Let's put the needle down before it changes its mind. And get our lock stitch in. And with my left hand, I'm really holding all of the stuffing and the lavender seeds, lavender flowers back. I don't know why I keep saying seeds. Okay. And just go steady. And if you need to stop and reposition your hands, do that. Use it to massage everything out of the way. And we're aiming to go over the beginning of our top stitch line. If it's just a little bit wonky, you know, it doesn't matter. It's just sewing and it's a bit of fun. Right, I'm going over my initial top stitch line and I'm going to lock stitch into place. So I'm going to get that out from underneath the machine and let's have a look under the camera properly. There we have a beautifully closed out gap. As I said, if it's a little bit wobbly, it doesn't matter. So we get our little scissors and we're just going to trim any loose threads that we've got because we don't want those. Anything on the back. Okay, and if we're happy we've got no loose threads, now is the time to get all our thumbs and our fingers and give it a good swish around and get all our lavender seeds evenly distributed throughout our stuffing. Look at our little shark. Make sure our stuffing is all nice and smooth. And we've got no lumps and bumps in there. Look, a little jellyfish. How cute. So there you have it. You have two, in my case, hearts, but you have your very own stripy lavender heart and it smells amazing. And that's all you have to do. So do let me know how you get on. I'd love to hear from you. Find me on the internet, my Facebook page or wherever. Do please share your photos of the ones you've made. I'd love to see them. I will love you and leave you for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. I'll see you soon. Bye.